Welcome back to the Mina Kimes Show, featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast. One of the hosts is not afraid of the Oklahoma City Thunder. He has a special jacket for that. That's Lenny. I'm Mina Kimes. I am joined today to do X Factors for the NFC. We did the AFC last week with the one, the only, JP Acosta. Welcome back to the show, JP.
Thank you for having me back on. I'm really excited. This was fun trying to put together these X Factors, and I think it's going to be really cool.
For those who don't know, JP writes for SB Nation about football. You can find him on pretty much every platform. You're on Blue Sky as JP Acosta as well, right?
Yep.
And he does excellent work. And I'm excited to have him here to do this because it is one of my favorite things to do. We go through every team and we pick an X factor who is not a quarterback. So it has to be a player who's not a quarterback, because it would obviously just be the quarterback for almost every team. And it's also not a coach, which is another thing. I think you definitely pick some coaches for a few of these teams. We are going to start with the NFC North today, and we're going to start with a team that was in the news yesterday when the Detroit Lions announced that their all-pro center, one of the best centers in football, Frank Ragnow, one of my favorite names for a center, by the way, Ragnow, is retiring. The Lions, I don't know if they said this. It was reported that they expected this to happen. JP is going to do the Lions. You don't have to do anyone on the offensive line. I'm just giving the news, but I have a sneaking suspicion that might weigh into your pick.
It definitely weighed into my pick. Before the Ragnow retirement, I was sort of leaning towards whoever's going to rush the passer opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. But with the Ragnow retirement, my X factor is actually a tie between Graham Glasgow and Tate Ratledge. Basically, whoever is the guy who steps into that center spot to fill in for Ragnow. And I don't think people understand how good and how crucial Ragnow was to the Lions' success in the run game. He was a warrior playing through multiple injuries. And the reason this is such a big issue for the Lions is because if you start Tate Ratledge at center, he never played center in college. He was a exclusive left guard. You can move Graham Glasgow to center. He has the experience, but per all the practice reports, it's been Ratledge getting the starts at center through all the OTAs. So if you can get consistent play out of a rookie starting at center for a team that wants to go and win the Super Bowl, he's got to play really well. You have to find consistency at that spot.
Tate Ratledge is also 6'7". That's so tall for a center. I'm not saying. Oh, I have no idea. They did say they drafted him with the intent. I think with this in mind as a possibility. They have the Lions have one of the best offensive line coaches in the league, Hank Fraley. The proof is in the pudding of how well that line has played over the last few years. And I also trust Brad Holmes when it comes to scouting these guys. But it's a lot to ask. I mean, you talked about how much Ragnow did in the run game. It's a really complicated run game with a lot of moving parts that does just about everything. And you're also replacing 2 out of 3 interior linemen, so it's not like you're keeping the guards and their veterans and he's just diving right in if he were to play center instead of Glasgow. Christian Mahogany, who's the other guard, did play a little bit of some last year and looked pretty good, pretty solid for them. But it's a lot, man. Like, this is, something that's come up with the Lions ever since Dan Campbell gave that, great quote about after they got eliminated from the playoffs a year ago about how hard it is to get back. It's been kind of a question with the Lions. Like, is there a window? What would cause the window to shrink? And to me, the offensive line has always been the key to this team. That said, it's not like they clearly haven't continued to invest resources in it, JP. Do you feel are you worried for Jared Goff at all? When we talk about the potential impact, let's say they don't play well or there's an adjustment period, new offensive coordinator, what do you think that might mean for this offense?
So initially I was a little less worried about the Lions offense because I do think Dan Campbell has a little bit more say in what the offense looks like, how it's run, how they're built. But with Ragnow not being out there, I think it's huge because he's also playing a pivotal role in protections and setting the protections against a lot of the blitz looks that you'll obviously see from teams like Minnesota twice a year. You'll see Green Bay and what Jeff Hafley did in the second half of the season last year. So I think if we see a little bit of uneasiness from Jared Goff to start the season, it makes sense because he is now the one setting all the protections himself.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how that affects the Lions offense, especially their passing game. But like you said, it feels like it's all coming back to the Lions and like, oh, winning consistently in the NFL is really hard,
Yeah.
especially with an offensive line that is really good, but also aging. But I also think that Brad Holmes did a really good job of understanding that this team is getting older up front, and they've consistently taken a swing on guys on the offensive line. Mahogany last
Yeah.
year, Tate Ratledge, Miles Frazier was a day 3 pick this
Another
draft
player should
cycle
mention.
that
Yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
really intrigued by in terms of playing guard or center. But I'm worried a little more than I was going into the season about the Lions offense, but I think they have a little too many answers to really take a big step back.
I agree. I mean, my overarching through the Lions, I'll get into this more when we do preview the NFC North, is even if there's a step back on offense, I think it'll be mitigated by, half of the defense not being out due to injury. So there might be a little bit of give and take between those two units in terms of performance. But it's a tough division, and these types of players' injuries do end up being the margins, between all four of these teams could be playoff teams. And yeah, I think those two players are good ones to choose for that reason. Tate Ratledge, step right up, man. I mean, whew. Michael Jr., by the way, Lions fans, my friend Michael Jr., I always go to for offensive line evaluations. Big fan of Ratledge coming out of college. He's posted some clips on social media of him just, both in pass protection and run blocking. So I think, there's a case for optimism there. Okay, I'm going to go to the Green Bay Packers, which was one of my teams. And I really try not to pick too many first round draft picks for these, but I do feel like Matthew Golden is going to be a pivot point for the Packers this season. Um, last year at the end, the offense, there were issues for a number of reasons, and Jordan Love had kind of a complicated season where I still think he was really good, and I talked about that with the quarterbacks pod. But one thing that they really needed at the end was a reliable deep threat. And I say reliable because it's not just about speed and getting open, which Christian Watson's really the only guy on this team who you kind of trust in that regard, but also not dropping the football. This Packers receiving group had the highest drop rate in the NFL. And that was something that, Golden, it's funny because like he had a kind of a bad drop, not a bad, but not a great drop rate in college. But as somebody who watched every single one of, his, not every single one, but most of his snaps ahead of the draft, he was throwing some horrible footballs from
Yeah.
Quinn Ewers. So, and he made him right a lot. So I do think that there's a chance that that's not going to be an issue for him in college. But perhaps most importantly, he was just a big play machine. He had 13 catches over 20 yards, which is the eighth most of any player in college football, and started amping up as his usage amped up. Jordan Love is a guy who loves to throw the ball deep. We know that. But Christian Watson, outside of him, I mean, he was just overwhelmed, even, despite some injuries, overwhelmed the team in target share and yards per route run on deep balls. He is hurt. So to me, if Golden can become the explosive deep threat that they, I think, hoped he would be when he drafted, I'm feeling pretty good about this offense, JP.
Yeah, and I think with Golden, understanding what the Packers offense wants to do is such a big reason for why Golden is so important. They want to be explosive throwing the ball downfield. Jordan Love does not throw checkdowns. He is either going to throw the ball 40 yards downfield to a receiver that's going to get the ball, or he's going to throw it into the other team's hands, which is fine because of how efficient they want the run game to be. When you go out and have Josh Jacobs, who isn't the fastest or most explosive runner, but he can get you those 5 yards, those 4 yards that they consistently need to be on schedule. With Golden, you need his ability, not just the speed. And honestly, it was really funny after the combine when he ran the 4.29. Everyone's like, "Oh, this vertical deep threat guy, that's all he does." But the thing that stood out to me the most with Golden is the focus and the
Yeah.
concentration on these deep passes and the body control on the outside, which is why I think he could survive as an outside receiver without Christian Watson. But the thing for Golden is you have to be able to create layers for the offense. If Jaden Reed is still going to be sort of the in-between guy, Romeo Dobbs is going to be a short yardage. He's going to be work more of the physicality. You cannot build your offense out of all these guys constricted
Yeah.
over the middle of the field, because then, just like we saw in the Eagles game in the playoffs, you can just constrict them. And then you're forcing Jordan Love to throw into tight windows downfield, which leads to some of the variance.
I love that point. I think because I remember this time last year, remember Matt LaFleur was saying, I'm sick of being asked about number ones. And I think what needs to be clarified is kind of what you're saying. You don't need a dominant receiver. You need receivers with dominant traits. Receivers who have distinct roles where if you encounter a problem, team that takes you in the middle of the field, team that constricts you, a team that plays a lot of man coverage, you have a guy who's an answer for that. And I think Golden has a skill set where he can give them an answer that they've not reliably had on this offense. He fleshes out the group in a way that I'm really optimistic about, honestly. So yeah, I think it could be. I mean, I'm still high on Jordan Love, so we talked about this. I'll never quit him. I mean, maybe will. Okay, let's do. You got a fun one. The Minnesota Vikings. I have no idea what you're going to pick for this because it's so obviously the quarterback. So
yes, it's so obviously the quarterback, but because we're not doing a quarterback, I actually went with Ryan Kelly, the center. And I think this is going back to the point we made about Tate Ratledge and the Lions, and that is having a good center or a veteran center in front of a young quarterback takes so much pressure off of a young quarterback. And I think we might end up talking about it later for another team in this division. But you don't want to have your rookie quarterback, your young quarterback, doing everything to start off. And that's one of the biggest things I learned last season watching the Commanders, watching the Broncos. You don't want to ask these guys to do the Masters level stuff right away because the windows are so much quicker in the NFL. Those things happen so much faster. Get them. You got to start off with the 101 stuff and then add on as you develop, as you keep going throughout the season. And I think for JJ McCarthy, having a veteran center in front of him is going to help with protections, going to help with just seeing the game a little better. But not only that, he's also going to help with Donovan Jackson, who might be starting at left guard. Yeah. So with Jackson, you can insert him a lot easier because you have Christian Darrisaw at tackle, Ryan Kelly at center. But Kelly is really of course, he is the fulcrum, the pivot point to where he's helping both of the prized rookies on this offense to keep this offense afloat.
That's a great point about it not just being about him helping JJ McCarthy, but also Donovan Jackson, who's going to start right away. I mean, the Vikings had such an obvious mandate this offseason, right? Or at least they acted with such obvious intention in terms of bolstering both the interior of the offensive line and the interior of the defensive line. In a way that, when you look across this division, there's such an identity now with all these teams. They've all kind of invested a lot in their lines. You're right. We will talk about another one shortly. And I think I like this route of adding a veteran. They basically imported the Colts interior offensive line quietly by the Colts. Nobody's really talking about that offensive line suddenly having been kind of ripped apart a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved, what it does potentially for JJ McCarthy. Also, I'm going to be very curious to see if they run the ball more. This is a team that has not run the ball much under Kevin O'Connell. I don't think that's a philosophical thing. I think he just was like, we're bad at running the ball. And we have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. And it made sense. But I think I know from the way he talks about football and his lineage, he would love to marry the run and the pass a bit more and have a more dynamic and efficient running game. And I do think that starts with the inside of the offensive line. All right, we're making it 3 for 4 with centers in the NFC North because my pick, you know me too well, was Drew Dahlman for the Chicago Bears. Very similar logic here to what you just said when you talked about Ryan Kelly in Minnesota. Caleb Williams had way too much on his plate as a rookie. So similarly to the Vikings, the Chicago Bears at Ryan Poles invested heavily in the interior of the offensive line. Now you're looking at a composition of Braxton Jones, Joe Thuney, Drew Dahlman, Jonah Jackson, who's kind of questions about him.
Yeah.
And Darnell Wright potentially could be one of the better lines in football. These are all proven veterans. who I feel like will just take a load off Caleb Williams' shoulders. That said, I went back and watched some Drew Dalman because I think you and I were both watching Week 18 Falcons Panthers at the same
Yeah.
time, which is really fun. We're going to talk about the NFC South, obviously. I felt like I didn't learn much in that game because the Panthers pass rush was so non-existent. So I went back and watched some of his harder matchups. Pittsburgh Week 1 was pretty ugly, and I kind of came away with like a mixed report card. I think his reputation, I don't know how he is talked about in the league, and he obviously was paid well, and Chicago thought highly of him. He is much better at run blocking than pass protection. He is a very, very good zone blocking center, which is what primarily did in Atlanta. He's very athletic, very smooth. Pass protection, he can get beat with speed. I noticed that. I didn't feel like he was like out of position or it was like a mental thing. I just you didn't see him dominating dudes the way he did versus the run. So, but he gets to play next to Joe Tooney. That's going to help a lot. But I do think whether or not he can be good in pass protection could be a pivot point for the Chicago Bears this season.
I definitely agree. And you talked about it a lot with Caleb Williams. It felt like if you've played the game Overcooked on PlayStation or whatever gaming system you have, it felt a lot like Caleb Williams is playing Overcooked, where everything is burning at the same time,
I have
and you
played.
go to put out one thing, and something else pops up, and now you're going to try out put out other fires. Which is why I think what Ben Johnson and the Bears did by adding veterans in front of them, like you said, they'll just help put out those fires a little easier. The Dahlman thing really intrigued me because, like you said, he's a great zone blocking center, which made me go, oh, they might be running a lot more like wide zone, a lot more outside zone to use the movement skills. But like you said, the pass protection is a little worried because he's undersized. He's gonna be a guy who might struggle against speed because he's always bracing to get run over by every bigger guy that he sees that knows. But playing next to Joe Tooney, playing next to Jonah Jackson, and even Jonah Jackson might be a little bit of a question mark with his injury history. Playing next to bigger guys or veteran guys will help him out a lot, and I think they'll mask some of the inefficiencies. But the biggest thing, like you said, is just giving Caleb Williams someone else to like. There was a viral clip last season of like, I think the center was like, "We're on fire, man," and Caleb was like, "I know." And it's like, oh my god, everything's happening at the same time. Having a veteran in front of him is going to help him a lot in a big way.
I have to think that Ben Johnson had a strong hand in player selection when it came to these interior offensive linemen that they spent so much on. And yeah, they're kind of telling. I like when you see the Dalman pick, I'm thinking, all right, this is going to be zone running, hard play action. I'm really fascinated by this Bears offense and how, because on paper, a lot of really good pieces, really great offensive coach, but in execution, I'm very, I kind of want to see it before I develop like strong takes about it. I'm optimistic though. I do feel like it was smart team building. I think the question is just going to come down to whether or not this was the right player to spend that kind of money on. All right, let's do the NFC East next. You go first with the Philadelphia Eagles, the reigning champs.
So this is another one that I also went back and forth on, mainly on the defensive side of the ball, but I'm actually going to go Zach Bond again. And I think I'm going with Bond not only because of how important he is to that specific defense, but because of how much the linebacker room is kind of in flux right now for Philly. Drafting Jahad Campbell in the first round, I think Vic Fangio talked today and was like, Jahad Campbell's probably not going to be ready until August. Nakobe Dean's not going to be ready for even longer than that. So right now, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is getting those starting reps next to Zach Bond in the middle of that defense. But for Bond specifically, what he can do in terms of getting the fronts to change without always having to add bigger guys or take smaller guys off the field, that's going to be huge for this defense because they're still retooling up front. Jalix Hunt going to be playing a lot more. You're going to get guys like Moro Ajomo playing more. So having more of a veteran presence in the middle with Bond and being able to do the stuff that he did last year in terms of walking down to the edge, playing off the ball, and being able to shift those fronts during the play, I think is going to be huge. But on a larger scale, linebacker play is also sort of volatile in the NFL. You don't really,
Mm,
the consistency off ball, you don't really see a lot of unless you're Fred Warner. And even then, like you don't know what's going to happen. So I'm really intrigued to see what Bond looks like this season behind a defensive line that's going to be much younger, but a lot more
yeah.
inexperienced.
I think that's a great pick because there's so much change, not so much change, but all of the change outside of Mekhi Becton is on the defensive side of the ball. Up front is where you're seeing the biggest number of snaps walk out the door. And, uh, Zach Bond's the quarterback of this defense, but he's not just like the quarterback. He's also the straw that stirs the drink, to your point, both in terms of how they rush the passer, how they align their fronts, what he's able to, his versatility was such a weapon last year for Vic Fangio. And also, yes, the fact that he might have a young starter next to him, well, two young starters in Trotter and then um, Jihad Campbell when he plays. August, by the way, I was actually like, that's actually better than I thought when I heard that. I thought, he might not even see the field this summer. So that is actually made me a little bit optimistic. But yeah, I think in terms of the volatility thing, that would be my concern. I will say though, I feel like older backers, there's something about like because the position is so mental at this point, when it clicks for them, they can sustain that level of play. Thinking about like Demario Davis in New Orleans just for years after the Jets being so good. What they have good coaching and they, because actually the other thing is that you still have Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, these young guys who played well in limited reps last year. So it's not like a total wholesale reworking of the defensive line. But yeah, and I think we know Jalen Carter is still going to be great. Jordan Davis is
Yeah.
still going to be great. So I wouldn't pick either of them as having to carry the defensive line. Okay, I'm going to go with so you just did the Eagles. I will do the Commanders next. This was an interesting one. I went back and forth between two players, both on defense.
Okay.
And ultimately, I ended up going with a guy who I really loved coming out of the draft, Johnny Newton, the defensive tackle. My other choice was
Yeah.
Lattimore, but that felt, I was like, oh, they kind of have some depth. I wouldn't be surprised. We'll see what happens with Lattimore. But I love that they drafted Trey Amos. There's some options outside of him. Whereas I think they kind of need Newton to be good. Defense is what worries me about the Commanders. It's what should worry anyone as opposed to the offense. I think they invested so much to stave off offensive regression. So even if Jane Daniels runs into some issues, I think the talent there will help. Whereas on defense, they really didn't do much, man. Like it's really interesting. The defensive line, Jonathan Allen is out. So your Javon Kinlaw is in. I think that was kind of a contract that befuddled a lot of people. Deron Payne's still there, of course. The pass rush was very blitz happy last year. You still have Frankie Louvu's one of the better blitzing linebackers in the league. Dorrance Armstrong, I thought, played well for them. But for them to really take it over the top, and I feel like play better than they did for most of last season on defense, you kind of need John Newton to take that leap. And I think there are flashes of it. In fact, game I went back and watched was the NFC Championship. Not the entire game, and he only played like half the game. So I was just watching his reps. And he was up against Mekhi Becton a lot, which was like quite a size discrepancy. And it was funny because you saw he struggled at times in run defense versus him, and that's kind of to be expected. But he used his quickness, I thought, to beat him as a pass rusher a few times. And you saw him chase down Hurts a couple times. And there's definitely something there. And I think there's a reason why the Commanders felt like comfortable moving on from Allen. So what did you see out of him? And why would you say he is or not important, is or isn't important to this defense?
So I actually was also a really big fan of Jai Newton entering draft last year, coming out of Illinois. I thought, again, it's the quickness and the violence that he has in his hands as a pass rusher. But I think with like what you said about the Commanders defense, they were so chaotic last year. It was very volatile. You rely a lot on blitzing to get pressures. Blitzing doesn't always, unless you're Todd Bowles, blitzing does not always equate to success year over year in the NFL. And you're also losing a lot of your pass rush production. Jonathan Allen is now in Minnesota. Dante Fowler Jr. is gone. He had a lot of production off the edge. You didn't really replace a lot of those guys. You added Javon Kinlaw, who is also incredibly volatile. So Newton has to play well as a pass rusher. Really, that's the biggest part that I think is going to be hammered home for Newton, because I think Deron Payne is a good enough run defender. Having Bobby Wagner behind Newton will also allow him to do more of the gap shooting stuff
Yeah.
that he really did a lot of at Illinois, and just let him do what he does best, which is rush the passer. But he has to be productive for rushing from the interior, because you lose a lot of that productivity out the door with all those free agents. I actually think the Commanders are kind of prepared to let Allen go this offseason because of drafting Newton. That was kind of their off ramp early. So he's got to play well as a pass rusher specifically for this to work.
Neither of them were very good in run defense last year. I mean, this whole unit was pretty bad. 26 in DVOA against the run, allowed the third most yards before contact per carry in the NFL. I'm a little skeptical of that improving. And of course, you're in a division with the big bad running team who ran for like 300 yards on you in the playoffs. So yeah, that's a concern of mine. But I think his pass rushing upside is like very real, and I'm still a believer in that. All right, the Giants.
Oh man.
This is hard
Uh
to do because it's hard to know like who's playing quarterback, what's the goal here, right? Because I don't think we either of us think the goal for the Giants is to make a deep playoff run. So it's a little bit different from some other teams.
it was hard because I knew I wanted to go offensive line, because all the
Mhm.
quarterbacks that the Giants have really bad metrics under pressure. And some of them, like Russell Wilson, averse to pressure. Jameis Winston's going to throw the ball into traffic under pressure. I think Jackson Dart showed when during SEC competition, when he got pressured, it got really scary for him. And then Tommy DeVito is Tommy DeVito. So I went with Andrew Thomas here, largely because he's coming off the
Really?
list Frank. He's coming off the list Frank injury. Having him healthy makes so much of a difference for this offensive line. Of course, he's one of the best left tackles in the game. But last season, with Andrew Thomas on the field, the pressure rate they gave up was 32.8%, which isn't incredible, but compared to 43.4% when he is off the field, that is a massive drop. And that's something where, if you're Brian Daboll, you know you have to keep these guys on the field. You have to keep Andrew
Yeah.
Thomas on the field specifically, because he elevates everybody else on the offensive line. He elevates the offense. So it was difficult because I'm really worried about them up front more than I am their skill position guys. But I I think if Thomas stays healthy, you can at least figure out what you got in some of the youth on the team.
Yeah, I forgot about the injury. It's a good point because I was like, really? Because it's Andrew Thomas. He's by far the best player on this offensive line. But you're right. Like if he's not healthy or if he struggles in any way, whoo, buddy, this is going to get ugly because the rest of the offensive line still question marks throughout. Um, it seems like they've kind of given up on Evan Neal. Maybe I haven't tapped into the
Yeah,
latest stat of there.
he's moved to guard, and
Yeah.
he's
Okay.
still not starting at guard, so it might be curtains there.
So it would be Jermaine Illuminor, and then they drafted the Purdue tackle.
Bo,
Yeah,
yeah,
there's
it'd
something
be.
there.
I think Bo is actually really fun. I was really high on him. I was surprised he lasted till day 3, but I think
Yeah.
he legitimately has like guard, center, tackle versatility. Would not be surprised he ends up starting games for them right away.
I thought he was gonna play guard. I'm looking at the depth chart, he's listed as a tackle. He's a little bit smaller on the smaller
Yeah,
side for a tackle, that would be kinda surprising. But, yeah, I think it's a good point whether or not it's Wilson or whether it's a rookie quarterback. If they can't run the ball well too with either of those quarterbacks, I think they're in for a world of hurt. Um, and it's really gonna come down to that offensive line. It's funny because I talked about this with, Brett Coleman. The defense is suddenly, like, fun and nice.
yeah.
Um, They might even crack my top 10 defenses. We'll see. I got to think about that one. But it's a very fun and very spicy group. So I think you're right to focus on the offense being the X factor at the pivot point. All right. Cowboys, I wanted to be a hipster and say Jack Sanborn because
Yeah.
I think he's the best linebacker that they traded for Kenneth Murray Jr., who I'm just not a fan of his game, to be honest. And I don't think he solves any of their problems. I really think Sanborn, who's the Bears linebacker and then just got crowded out because they invested so much in the position, I really think he can play, JP. And I'll plant my flag here. He's going to become a starter. I'm telling you, in a very, very weak linebacker group. That's been the Achilles heel of that defense, of course. But I'm not going to pick him. I'm going to go with an offensive player, and this is not a hipster pick at all. I think it's George Pickens.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. There's nobody else on the offense that outside of CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott is more important to this team than Pickens. I it's very funny because George Pickens is good at maybe like two things on the field, but when he is focused and
yeah,
playing to his potential, he is one of the best players in the NFL at those two specific things, which is running slants and running fades down the sideline. And you think about what the Cowboys offense was when they were super good. And I think it is having a guy like Michael Gallup on the outside who
yeah.
could win those contested catch situations down the field. It was an Amari Cooper who allowed CeeDee Lamb to do all the movement stuff. If George Pickens can do that stuff without trying to fight Mike Sainristil every 3 plays, the offense again has layers, and now you take so much heat off of CeeDee Lamb.
Over the last 3 years, George Pickens is third league wide in deep passes catches over 20 yards. CeeDee Lamb is fifth, despite the fact that both these quarterbacks over the last 3 years have had to play with assortment of, or both receivers, have had to play with assortment quarterbacks. In that same time, Dak Prescott is second league wide in completion percentage over expected on deep balls. If Pickens is consistent at all, he lifts the ceiling of this offense so high because of the quarterback and the other wide receiver. And they're going to open up things for the run game. I mean, defenses are not going to play a lot of single high against this team, right? You're
Yeah.
sending out your quarterbacks to die. So to me, yeah, we can talk about the run defense. Yeah, we can talk about whether or not, there's a million other things with the Dallas Cowboys. But the case for them either, being a playoff team really, to me, comes down to whether or not this offense can go to the degree he suddenly makes them capable of going.
And I think it makes a lot of sense to invest in a guy like Pickens because of offensive coordinator Clayton Adams comes from Arizona. He was the offensive line coach with the Cardinals, and they did a lot of stuff out of 2 backs, 12 personnel, 13 personnel, getting bigger bodies on the field, which meant you're going to only play George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb as your 2 receivers. If you can remain explosive out of 12 personnel, you create so many different problems for defenses. You open up the run game, like you said. If you want to try and spin somebody into the box because of the run game, then you're leaving your corners one-on-one with a guy who, like you said, can win down the field. So if Pickens is focused and Pickens wants to be here, this offense can get really dangerous really quickly.
All right, let's take a quick break, come back, and talk about the aforementioned NFC South. All right, we are back, and I am so excited to talk about this division after watching that Week 18 game. You have the Falcons. Go first. Let's do this team.
I would love so much to just like say if we can't choose quarterback, so Michael Penix obviously out of the question. It has to be Jalen Walker for me. I tried to stay away from going with rookies here, but when you look at what the Falcons were bad at last season, which is rushing the passer, and where they kind of found their answers in terms of simulated pressures, bringing guys from depth, dropping guys from off the edge, it was something actually. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot his name. Matt Judon said he didn't like about the defense was all the simulated pressures because he just wanted to rush. That's what Jalen Walker allows you
Yeah.
to do. He has to be able to create pressure and allow for Jeff Ulbrich, allow for Raheem Morris, who it seemed like he was calling the defense towards the end of the season when they bumped up the sim pressures.
Interesting.
If he is able to unlock Jalen Walker and get him to be sort of like a Frankie Louvu in terms of how he's being used, I think the defense just gets at least 1% better as a pass rush unit, which would be getting them up off the floor.
There was a game, I looked it up. It was at the very end of the year against the Commanders, where they were going so crazy with the simulated pressures. Caden Ellis was often the focal point, who's their best pass rusher, but he's, an off-ball linebacker. And I loved the Walker pick for a number of reasons. I had him as my edge 2 in the class behind Abdul Carter, but also the fit. Yeah, it's like a perfect fit for this defense if they continue operating the way you just described. I feel like that combination of him and Ellis has the potential to be really confusing and confounding, and I don't think this is going to be one of the best pass rushers in the league by any point, but that's not the point for the Atlanta Falcons. Like, they just need to get out of the basement of rushing the quarterback, and I really think there's potential for them to do so with that pick. I'm looking elsewhere. I mean, they drafted a couple safeties who we like. Leonard Floyd is now on the team. I just think the amount of draft capital they invested in the pass rush this year, you really need
something's got to happen from there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're also getting Braylon Trice back from injury, and I thought Trice was also a good pick for them last season. Got hurt before season. He's gonna at least help in the pass rush unit, but not having one like overall like dominant edge guy could help. Just like we're gonna get our pass rush buckets from everywhere. So if you can just, like you said, get off the floor when it comes to pass rush, maybe that's all this team needs.
All right, I'm gonna go next. I'll do the Panthers, who was the other team that I really enjoyed watching in that game. Look, I could do Ted McMillan, who is very important to Bryce Young's development, and I really love. But it's the same as the Falcons' logic for me. This part of the reason Week 18 was so fun to watch is because both these defenses were so bad, and so both quarterbacks were just like hooping. The Panthers defense. Oh, so my Panthers pick is Derek Brown.
Yeah,
who was the best player on the team, best defensive player. They gave him a huge contract. He got hurt. He missed the entire season. The defense was an absolute nightmare without him. Nobody could get after the quarterback, but they were, more importantly, just absolutely dismal against the run. So bottom in everything: success rate, EPA per play, yards per carry. They gave up 5.2 yards per carry as a defense. To put that in context, the Eagles averaged 4.9 yards per carry. So they turned every offense that faced them into a better version of the Philadelphia Eagles run game. So, a lot of changes, bring in some nose tackles, Bobby Brown, Tershawn Wharton. They draft a couple pass rushers. But Derek Brown, to me, has to be, once again, the best player on this team. He's really complete. JP was really good. Both he's at rushing the quarterback and stopping the run, and it really starts with him.
And I think that point about Derek Brown makes so much sense because of how the Panthers defense is structured with Ejiro Evero calling plays. Yeah. They want to defend the run out of light boxes. The problem is last season, outside of the Dallas Cowboys, nobody else was worse at defending the run out of light boxes than the Carolina Panthers. They gave up 6.7 yards per carry out of light boxes and also a 0.19 EPA per attempt. That cannot happen again. You cannot get much worse. And the problem is they ran the fourth most snaps of run defense again with light boxes. The Cowboys, you could at least make an excuse for the Cowboys by saying they don't run light boxes that much. This is how the Panthers want to win. This is how they want to play football. if you're going to do this, if you're going to play light boxes, you have to be better up front. And Derek Brown has to be healthy because he is the guy that kind of, like we said with Zach Bond, he is both the most important player and the straw that stirs the drink for this defense. If you're able to get him isolated pass rush snaps, he'll be the guy who wins the most. You have to get him healthy to defend the run, to keep your linebackers free. So Brown has to be the guy.
So real opportunity here for Ejiro Evero, who you remember was getting head coaching looks, has stayed in Carolina. I think nobody around the league blames him for the. This was such an untalented, but they've given him players. Trevon Merrick comes in at safeties. At edge, I alluded to this. They drafted Nick Scorton and Princely Uman-Milan. So there's a little bit more competence now, but yeah, it really starts with, and I talked about the defensive tackles as well. It really starts with Derek Brown. All right, who do you have for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
I'm going to go full hipster pick here. I'm
Okay.
going to go with Servassier Dennis, linebacker for
Wow.
the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the reason I'm going with Dennis is because they didn't add a lot to that off-ball linebacker room during the offseason. They added Anthony Walker Jr., which I thought was surprising because they were one of the worst teams in the NFL at defending the middle of the field, especially after Servassier Dennis got hurt. He missed the rest of the season. They gave up the 6th highest DVOA over the middle of the field. They were 28th in DVOA against running backs and tight ends. And the problem wasn't the defensive structure, it was their personnel. You have J.J. Russell and K.J. Britt trying to chase down running backs and tight ends, and that's not going to be sustainable at all. I remember watching going back and watching the Commanders game in the playoffs, and all they were doing was just hammering the middle of the field because Lavonte David had to blitz all the time. In that simulated pressure stuff, he was the one blitzing. But with Dennis on the field, he and David kind of create a little bit more of David can play in space. He can play more in coverage. Dennis is a better blitzer. I think he's arguably the fastest linebacker on the team. But having two guys who are capable at blitzing and playing in coverage allows Todd Bowles to get a whole lot more creative with that defense. So I was kind of going between Dennis or a guy like Yaya Diaby, but I think Dennis and his ability to play in coverage is going to make a huge difference for this Bucs defense.
Lavonte David himself picked him as a pivotal player when I interviewed him. It's on my YouTube channel. Go check it out if you're a Bucs fan. YouTube.com/Mina Kimes, because he talked about the Bucs a lot. And I asked him if he was surprised they didn't add a linebacker. This was a team I thought might take Jihad Campbell. So they took a wide receiver. And he said, no, we're happy with Dennis. We think he showed stuff. He's growing. He's a young player. And it's a great pick because really the front seven to me is where this Bucs team will live or die this year. I mean, they've continued to invest in the offense. I think, yeah, it's between that linebacker and pass rusher, like you said. I would say I'll throw out another one. If Hassan Reddick can go back to being Hassan Reddick, that's a big deal for this team.
Yeah.
But, because he obviously had a chaotic season last year, off season, and didn't play well when he came back. I would not, he's still young, man. He's not that far removed from being a dominant pass rusher with Philadelphia, and now he gets to play for Todd Bowles. So I would say, this is a team that's not been able to rush the passer well in recent years. He, to me, could be a pretty significant pickup for them on a 1-year prove-it deal. So he has a lot of incentive to play well.
Yeah, and I think if Reddick can kind of be if you can get guys that can rush the passer without needing the help of blitzes or trying to get all the unblocked pressures, it allows you to be more creative in coverage, which again is where they kind of lacked a lot of integrity over the middle of the field. But it really does come down to this front seven for this defense.
All right, the Saints.
Ooh.
Can you guess who I'm going to pick?
I have no idea.
Right, because it's what is the Saints season about? What are you hoping for? What matters here? I thought about this for a while, and I'm going, and I'm thinking about this to the extent of what would a successful Saints season look like, and I went with Chris Olave. Chris Olave, to me, there's the expectations for the Saints season are very low, But both in the short term and the long term, if the goal is to figure out who the pieces are that we can trust, build around, there's actually, a core of young players. Olave is best player on the team. I mean, he at his peak has looked like one of the better young receivers in the NFL. Over the last 3 years, he's 15th in yards per route run, above Mike Evans, Drake London, Zay Flowers. He is a true 3-level threat who can beat man coverage. And this is so last year, so he's also has, we should say this, 4 confirmed concussions, which is the big question mark. Can he stay on the field? Does he want to stay on the field? Is it in the best interest for him? Something that kind of struck me, I looked this up because I was curious. Last year, when he did play, he played some. He led all receivers in NGS burst rate, which is how fast a receiver gets in a second into their route. He still got the juice and the goods. By the way, Shaheed is also up there too. So I just feel like if he can be healthy and look like Chris Olave, suddenly you're like, okay, we got something on offense.
And I think Olave is going to be important for whoever is going to be throwing the
Yeah.
ball for the Saints, because it at least gives you a reliable target on the outside. I'm curious, like you said, with all the concussions and all the injuries, I wonder how much you kind of run him over the middle of the field,
Oh, it's a
which
good point.
was a
Yeah.
big point in the Clint Kubiak offense. But with Kellen Moore, do you play him more like a bigger guy like AJ Brown, who did a lot of the slants, middle of the field stuff, or do you play him like Devontae Smith? And I think if you have a guy like Olave, who is so quick and explosive on the outside, if you can keep him, I'm not going to say confine him to one section of the field, but in order to mitigate the risk of him getting hurt again, running him on all these outbreakers, on all the comebacks, on all the outside plays is going to give you a lot of chances to actually get him through a season fully healthy. I also think, I was wondering if you were going to offensive line here, because you got to figure out who your best 5 are
Yeah.
eventually. But
Yeah.
Olave is the best player on this offense.
Yeah.
Getting a full season from him has to be important, like you said, just to figure out if you can count on him in the long run.
Yeah, Banks Jr. and Fargo would be my other 2 guys on the tackle positions, because they've invested so much in this offensive line. And like you said, whoever's playing quarterback, it has to be better. I love your point, like thinking about the coordinators. That's such a great point, because Kellen Moore's offense, we think about what it's going to look like. I actually think, yeah, like you could really see Chris Olave, who has kind of a similar skill set to Devontae Smith, by the way. I think you could see him flourish. And this, like, if he's healthy, Chris Olave, Brandon Cooks, Shaheed,
It's
bombs
pretty
away,
fun.
man. Bombs
It's pretty
away.
fun.
Like, and you got a quarterback in Tyler Shook, assuming he starts, who can sling it. Spencer Rattler can sling it. So, yeah, but you're right that the offensive line could certainly be the limiting factor. All right, let's wrap with the NFC West.
Uh,
I gave you the Niners,
yeah.
right? Yeah, do the Niners.
All right. So I was choosing between 2 people here. The first one was Ricky Pearsall, because
Yeah,
I think if Pearsall can kind of step up with the lack of Deebo Samuel, the offense still can be very good. But I'm gonna bank on the fact that Kyle Shanahan is still like one of the best play designers of football. He's going to get good play out of anybody. I try to stay away from rookies, but I had to go with Alfred Collins here, because watching the 49ers run defense last year
yeah,
made me so mad. And it made me mad because if you watch the 49ers defense from 2020, 2021, even 2019, they were really good when they had a true nose tackle, when they had DJ Jones to stop the run. The Niners gave up 0.04 EPA per rush last season. That is the most they've given up since before Kyle Shanahan got to San Francisco. They have to continue to shore up the middle of that run defense. That's been the biggest issue. They never had a true nose tackle out when DJ Jones left. They built their defense off of undersized defensive tackles going quick up the field, but you're going to get hammered in the run game. It's sort of what happened in the NFC Championship game against the Eagles when they got ran over by inside zone for most of the game. It happened last season when all the bodies started to fall apart. You couldn't stop the run at all. Alfred Collins was a monster run defender at Texas. That is the one thing that he did really well. Up and down the front, he was able to eat double teams, be able to make plays in the backfield. I think getting him starting and playing right away is going to help shore up the run defense a lot. It'll take a lot of pressure off Fred Warner, take a lot of pressure off the linebackers, and you're going to be able to get teams into second and third and long. If you think about what the Eagles did by drafting Jordan Davis, yeah, he might only be like a 2-down player, but if you get
Yeah.
teams into second and 13 instead of second and 6 or second and 7, the playbook opens up a whole lot more.
I think this is like the logic with the Lions taking Tyleik Williams, by the way, right? Like it's very much like, okay, let's see if we can improve where we are in series. Yeah, it's just been so obviously the problem with the Niners defense now for a couple years, 3 years maybe, trying to
Mm-hmm.
think. And they really let Robert Saleh put his stamp on this defense. Like it's really interesting, right? Like you look at Michael Williams, Collins, trading for Bryce Huff. The Niners clearly felt that that's where they had to get better as a team. Let me ask you this. Who do you think is going to be better, the Niners offense or the Niners defense?
Ooh. Uh Temporarily, I'm going to say the Niners offense because I think, like I
Yeah,
said up front with Pearsall, I think you can get great play out of any receiver in that Kyle Shanahan offense. I think keeping Jawan Jennings around is going to help a lot, and you're going to get
Diggs
continued
back.
growth. Yeah, you're going to get McCaffrey healthy back again. You're going to get another year of Dom Puny at right guard. Trent Williams going to be healthy. There's too much star power on that side of the ball, or too much consistency from the best players on that side of the ball that I have a lot of faith in compared to the defense where you're relying on a lot of unknowns, especially up front. The biggest unknown is if Michael Williams will play better in a role that's a little bit more suited for his play style. It's Alfred Collins playing the run. It's Fred Warner being healthy again. It's trying to find a replacement for Malik Mustafa, who unfortunately tore his ACL this offseason. So I'm temporarily going to say the Niners offense, but I wouldn't be surprised if this defense turns it around real quickly.
Probably would have, but your Collins is a good choice. Pearsall's a good choice. I would have probably gone Trent Williams just because if he doesn't play,
Yeah.
put a book like wrap it up like that because the rest of the offensive line is so dubious,
Mhm.
and we all know what it looks like with him on and off the field. But that's only about health for me. Like it's just if he plays. Okay, I will do the Seattle Seahawks next. God, I've taken so many centers. If there's a theme to this, it's been centers. I'm taking another one. I'm going to take their center, Oluwatimi, who was the 5th-round pick in 2023. He starts in between Greg Zabel and likely Christian Haynes, who was their 2nd-round draft pick a year ago, bookended by Charles Cross. And I Lucas could have been another, like, if he's healthy, because without him, but I'm taking it for a couple of reasons. One of which is um, Clint Kubiak comes in as offensive coordinator, and I think
Yep.
there's this belief that that's going to really help the offense because it's going to take pressure off the quarterback. It's a scheme that helps offensive linemen. Sure, and this is a quarterback who, Sam Darnold clean versus pressured last year alone goes from being an EPA success rate QBR, a top 10 quarterback kept clean, to a bottom 12 or so under pressure. However, with the Saints, when they lost their center, who's one of the better centers in football, whole baby, that train went off the
Yep.
tracks. Now, there was a lot of
Yep.
things that happened in New Orleans, but that was the main problem, obviously losing their quarterback. And so my feeling is if they can't get competent center play this year out of Olu, who they're really betting on, I think this thing is down on arrival in Seattle.
Yeah, I think I would also go offensive line here, whether it be Zabel, whether it be Oluwatimi, even like you said, Abe Lucas, because like you said, for Clint Kubiak last season, the offense fell apart as soon as all the offensive linemen started getting hurt. First, it was Eric McCoy being out, Ramczyk obviously dealt with his injuries. You were moving Trevor Penning
We
around a lot.
bunch of games too.
Yep.
Caesar, yeah.
So if you can get this offensive line, which it was rough last season watching them play because it felt like there was no structure to how they played, but getting this offensive line into a structured system with this wide zone, with a lot of outside zone stuff they're going to do, maybe that'll help out a lot. But Oluwatimi is so important because he's the one, like you said, he's going to help a lot with the movement skills on the backside of runs. And then in a lot of Shanahan offenses, he's the one calling the protections, setting the protections, which is going to play a big part of the offense because, like you said, Sam Darnold under pressure versus Sam Darnold clean is two completely different quarterbacks. So
Yeah.
it's got to be Oluwatimi. It's got to be this offensive line. They have to find a way to at least get average play for
Yes.
the season to look successful.
Yeah, I think my point here is just scheme only goes so far in helping an offensive line. Like, yes, if there's run pass balance, defenses can't pin their ears back the way they did last year in Seattle. Obviously, it was skewed. But, Ryan Grubb, this is not really in his defense, but like, I think it's a thing that sometimes, especially college coaches come in, they say, yeah, you want me to run the ball, but we can't run the ball. So then we're just gonna be in 3rd and 8. So what are you doing? Like, it's like, no, you got to really commit. So, but then you have to execute to a decent degree. And so I think that's going to be key for this Seahawks offense because we all know what the Seahawks offense wants to look like. They have told us loud and clear. Okay, Arizona Cardinals. I have a guess for this. Who are you going to pick?
Okay, you can guess.
Josh Sweat?
Yes, it is Josh Sweat.
Very clear, Josh.
I had to choose somebody big up front on that defense because, I mean, watching the Cardinals last season, I felt kind of crazy before season saying like, hey, this Cardinals defense is pretty fun. They do a lot of weird stuff. I think they are the most like pure to form college defense in the NFL. They run all of like the fronts that Georgia runs in college. They run the 3 safety stuff, which is awesome. But all that is it's cool until you get hit in the mouth by 330-pound guards and you can't defend the run and you have no consistent pressure guy. I think Josh Sweat plays a big role here because the Cardinals finished 28th in pressure rate, 28th in pass rush win rate. They need somebody up front who can win, or just somebody who can be consistent on the edge. I think Xavier Thomas is a fine designated pass rusher. Baron Browning's still coming along, but with how much they invested in the defensive line and how much money they paid Josh Sweat, he has to be a consistent 3-down force for this team.
Yeah, Josh Sweat has. So the Cardinals, they added some stability on defensive tackle. Calais Campbell comes in, Delvin Tomlinson comes in, and then they took some swings in the draft, right? Will Johnson, Walter Nolan, but Sweat is like supposed to be the sure thing. He's supposed to be like, this is the star. They're paying him like a star. He was incredible, obviously, at the Super Bowl, but I think before then, I don't know. I'd have to look at my rankings. I think of him as being in that like 10 to 20 range NFL. Maybe that's even too high. What do you think? Like, is that fair? 10 to 20 pass rushers? It's hard to know without doing the list.
I would probably put him closer to like 15 to 20 because I think he's really good rushing the passer. And I think he has such a weird body type where he's super long, but he also is like bendy. Like it's really weird. And I guess that fits the Cardinals defense, which is just really weird. But he has to be a force, like I said, against the run predominantly because his team gets run over. But as a pass rusher, he has to go get a bucket.
Do we think that Ollie Conley wrote a piece about this topic, whether the Cardinals defense is going to stay weird?
I think it's going to stay weird. I actually think this Cardinals defense can be sneaky good next season. Just in watching, I say it's kind of biased. I love the 3 safety defense. When I was coming out of Northwestern, I wrote about the 3 safety defense and if it could actually play in the NFL. And then seeing Nick Rawlins play the 3 safety stuff in the NFL, I'm like, oh, this is exactly how I thought it would go. But I think they're going to stay weird because that's kind of the bodies they have. They have so many good safeties. You can't
I think a good do you watch the games metric or question for people is just ask them about Budda Baker right now.
Yes.
And see what they say, because I don't even know how to describe it's so insane what he does in it.
he is just the most chaotic player in the NFL on defense. It's so funny just watching him kind of pick and choose where he goes because the defense just allows him to do that because he is the middle safety. There were a lot of times where he would overrun the play and Kaiser White's like, "Hey, you gotta relax. Like that's where I'm supposed to be." But I'm so excited to watch this defense again just because they have size up front now. So they can play a little bit more. They can play a little bit freer.
All right. We will wrap the final team, Los Angeles Rams. I'm gonna go with a Mina Kimes favorite, my guy Puna Ford.
Yeah. Yeah.
So last year the Rams were 27th in success rate versus the run, 28th in stuff rate, which is what it sounds like. 29th in stuff rate per FTN. The 28th was NGS, 26th in stopping runs behind the line of scrimmage. Simply put, they got no push. In fact, when defenses ran the ball on first down, they were the second worst team in the NFL in stopping the run. They Brenda Song famously roasted the Chris Shula, defensive coordinator, for the bad run defense. So in response, the Rams signed from the crosstown team, Chargers, Puna Ford, one of the most underrated players of his generation, in my opinion, in the NFL. A fantastic fit for the Rams scheme, by the way. Makes perfect sense. He's kind of been like the missing piece, honestly, on this defense. There are other issues defense. I'm worried about the cornerback position. I feel like they finished so strong and with such a brilliant game plan, and then they had the weird snow game that it kind of got overlooked how bad they were for most of the year outside of that 4-man rush. But I think that having Puna Ford and being better against the run on early downs will solve a lot of their problems.
I think the Rams signing Puna Ford is also a great reflection on a larger scale of where the NFL is going defensively, because playing 280-pound Kobe Turner next to 280-pound Braden Fisk is asking to give up what they gave up like 300 yards to Saquon Barkley in both games they played against the Eagles. I think that stuck with them for a long time because if you remember, not the playoff game, but the game they played in LA, Mekhi Becton was reaching the second level and planting Omar Spates into the ground every single play. I think I know the rep you're talking about where
there was one where you're just like, oh God.
It's like, man, I feel really bad for you because what else are you supposed to do? But I love Puna Ford. I actually have Puna Ford signing with the Rams as one of my favorite free agent signings of the cycle because of what the self-scouting that the Rams did and how well he fits into that defense, like you said, as a nose tackle and defending the run. And then on top of that, he doesn't have to play on pass rushing downs. You can just rotate your guys in a lot more and you're able to keep a lot of hits off of them. But the priority has to be stopping the run.
He also gives you a little pass rush juice on the inside. This is what makes him, I think, so underrated. He's not yes, he's built like Kirby, but he is not just a run stuffing nose. Like he actually has some juice in getting to the quarterback. So he's well rounded despite his size. Yeah, I love him. We took so many centers and nose tackles, I feel like.
that is pure football. That's the game that I love. We're talking about offensive linemen and tackles.
Oh my gosh. JP, before I let you go, are you working on anything coming out to let the folks know about?
So you can always find my work at SB Nation. I'm doing a whole lot of work on just wrapping up some things that I noticed from the 2024 season, doing a lot of scouting on next year's draft class, which will have a lot of very cool defensive players once again. But just follow along, see what I'm doing, see where I'm going. Got some pretty cool stuff there that's coming out later.
That's awesome. I have mentioned this. I've been doing these interviews, and I have more, including an interview with a player we talked about today. I'm not going to tell you which one. More players, interviews with football players coming out on my YouTube channel. But tomorrow, I immediately deviated from interviewing guys in our league, and I have an interview dropping with Cal Raleigh, the home run leader in baseball. So that's going to be on youtube.com/@Mina Kimes. You can listen and find out if I have the courage to ask him if he knows what a BBL is, something that I've been thinking about that interview's taking place in an hour. So youtube.com/Mina Kimes. Also, by the way, little announcement. My guy David Dennis Jr. and we've been doing the Love is Kimes podcast where we talk about Love is Blind. We are expanding because we love doing that so much. And we are now recapping TV shows all year, entertainment all year. Our first show will be Love Island, which our first episode drops on Thursday. We changed the name of the podcast to Viewer Discretion with Mina Kimes and David Dennis Jr. So if you're listening to this show and you like TV and just two friends shooting it, subscribe, rate, review, Viewer Discretion with Mina Kimes and David Dennis Jr. JP, do you watch any of those types of shows?
So my girlfriend got me into Love is Blind, and now I just can't stop watching. I was like, oh, well, we'll check it out. And now I'm just hooked. Like, hey, can we watch Love is Blind today? But
Love Island is a commitment. It is a commitment.
I'm going to see if I can get her into it.
Oh my God, please. It's so easy to get into. It's on Peacock, by the way. So check that out. It'll drop, like I said, Thursday morning on both its own podcast feed, and YouTube. In the meantime, thank you as always to everybody at Omaha Productions, Kirsten Specky, Anthony Jimenez, Owen Saylor, Jet Foster, Tucker Tashton, and I'll see you guys next week.